Chapter 14. You can get 1,000 no's from people and only one yes from God. Tyler Perry. His friends were good at what they did, Joe had to admit it. Their oratory was forceful, well choreographed, and persuasive. It contained all the points good religious people always said. The disturbing part was, before all this had happened, Joe might have thought the same things too. "So they're just rambling on and no one bothered to pray," Manuel said. Nigel nodded. "That's about it." Gabriel thought about that and nodded. "Sounds like a smart move on Satan's part. If he can divide them so they are at each other's throats, it will make his job a picnic." "It looks as though it's spreading," said Nigel. "First with Grace and now with his friends. They're at each other's throats." Gabriel paused to evaluate their situation. "If things don't change, we may lose, Joe. And we won't have the prayer backup to succeed in anything." "But what about those pesky imps?" demanded Nigel. "Surely they would be easy to root out." "No," said Gabriel. He was quite angry and frustrated. "They have the right to be there. Joe hasn't denied them access. He has given himself over to them, and until he learns the truth, this cancer will never slow its spread." "So what now?" asked Nigel. "Joel and Lionel are working to find a breach in the enemy's ranks, some weak spot in Satan's plan that we can use to help Joe. In the meantime, all we can do is watch." No, it was no demonic army, not even an alarming spirit, only a small horrid messenger, audacious enough to fly right over to them. "Are you Gabriel?" it cried out. "I am," replied Gabriel. "Satan has a message for you." The little imp hovered below them, calling out its message in a high, raspy voice. "He says I've cut Joe down and he will soon be mine. Be sure you do not interfere in any way. You do not have the right." The imp darted away like a little fly. Gabriel grimaced as he said, "We can only hope that Joe's parents have more wisdom than his friends." Joe's mom hesitated at the door to his bedroom, not sure whether to knock. She decided to peek first, hoping that he wasn't asleep. Seeing that he was snoring, she decided to head out to the deck to let him rest. When Joe woke up from his nap, he was pleasantly surprised to find his parents sitting out on the deck. The sun slowly drifted behind some clouds, creating a beautiful sunset. "You've been so very distant and quiet for the past few months. We thought we would stop by and see how things are going," his father remarked with one raised eyebrow. "Is everything okay between you and Grace? Your mother is a little concerned." Joe looked at his parents, his face calm and ruddy. He appeared haggard, gaunt, with only a careful blankness on his face. There was no animation in his dark eyes. He noted his parents' question as seriously as they meant it, thinking carefully before he answered. Joe looked at his parents for a long moment. Then, with some effort, he rearranged his expression into a slightly respectful smile. Joe's mother was always more insightful than his father. Perhaps it was because she spent more time praying and reading her Bible. With her hectic schedule, she sometimes only spent a few minutes, but at least she tried. Juggling her responsibilities with family, volunteer work, and church sometimes made it difficult. She seldom had time for herself. His father was always busy with work. He attempted to fit in time for his grandchildren's sports events, but little else. As soon as their traditional hugs and kisses were out of the way, they sat for a few moments in silence. "Joe," his mother asked, looking out towards the pier and the crashing waves as she spoke. "What is it, Mom?" She sighed, trying not to stare at Joe's scabby face. "I'm worried about you and Grace." "Why? What's wrong?" "Do you know something that Grace hasn't told me?" Joe asked, feeling fearful at once. She mumbled, fixing her eyes on a scantily dressed jogger. "You two don't seem like the happy couple we once knew. I know you've been through more than almost anyone can bear, but I hope your marriage will survive it." She paused to hold back tears. "There is something strange about the way you two look at each other, a hidden darkness." Joe frowned. He could see the waterworks coming. He bit his lip, and nothing bothered Joe more than tears. Why, today of all days? It's true, Grace and I barely touch each other anymore. But is it really any of my parents' business? I know it is difficult for Mom to ask this type of question, but I wish she hadn't. Why is she so overprotective? She is treating me like I'm a small child again. He laughed, though he did not meet her gaze. He struggled to find the right words. We're fine. The road has just been a little bumpy. Things are different without the kids. We just need some more time to rebuild and find our way. I think you are imagining the worst, Mom, he said quickly, struggling to keep his voice happy. Right then, he could not resist the urge to comfort her. He crossed the deck and leaned over, patting her hand. I'm sorry, Joe. I know you hate to see me cry. It's not your fault, Mom. A smile flashed across his face briefly, and then he sat down to watch the ocean. I know. She took a deep, ragged breath, trying to control herself. She wondered how she ended up being the one who was crying when she had come to comfort Joe. There was a knot brewing in his stomach. He'd forgotten how well his mother used to read him. Her prayers had cut right through all his disguises, and she saw the naked truth all too well. He looked up at the sky, his stare intent, as if he were reading something written in the newly appearing stars. He clenched his teeth together, glad he wasn't looking at his mother's face, fighting against the sobs that had threatened to overtake her again. He wanted to be truthful, but he had no idea how. Until now, he had never hidden secrets from her. He didn't have the courage to tell her everything. His parents let the subject drop. They were all quiet for a moment. They seemed to be waiting for Joe to say something. He was trying to think of something to say. Can I tell you what the worst part is? He asked hesitantly when his parents said nothing. Will it help you? His mother whispered. It might. It couldn't hurt. What's the worst part, then? The worst part is knowing what could have been. Knowing that I'll never see my children married or have any grandchildren. It seemed so effortless, comfortable, and easy. We were on the normal path everyone takes. Joe stared into space and waited for a moment. If the world was the way it was supposed to be, if there was no sinister evil hiding behind each corner, his parents could see what he saw, and they knew that he was right. If the world was the sane place it was supposed to be, Joe and Grace would still have their children, and they would still be happy. Joe didn't know if it was still out there for them. He had to believe it was. I used to think Grace was my only sunshine, but now it appears clouds have settled in, he sighed. The clouds I could handle. It's the tsunami that is overpowering me. His mother touched his shoulder, laying her head upon it. He exhaled at her touch and closed his eyes. It was very quiet. For a moment, Joe could hear the beating of his heart, slow and even. His father elbowed him playfully. His voice was very calm and practical. How about dinner at El Sombrero? I'm sure Grace would like a break from cooking. You two always seem to like that place. Me, I'm an old meat and potato man. It would be a nice walk, and we can watch the sunset. Returning home, Joe was greeted with a sharp jolt of unease. It felt like sharp claws were tugging at him. They remained invisible, hiding from him, tormenting and inflicting pain. Piercing his stomach, he realized how short his time might really be. Nothing the doctors had prescribed seemed to make even the slightest improvement in his physical condition. Fear, one of Satan's best tacticians, was now his ever-present companion. Joe was overcome with numbing, paralyzing dread. He willed himself to think clearly. Many spirits gathered around Joe's head, shipping his consciousness into a heap of senseless fragments. A drastic change in something would be necessary, and the key to what he wanted more than anything else in the world was getting his life back. He wanted it more than everything else in the world put together. Through clenched teeth, he whispered, "Please, Lord, help me. I want to be normal again and feel your presence. I trust that you will help me." A laser thread flashed, delivering the request to the throne of God. The demons, who were frolicking in their successful day, gave it no notice. Satan's eyes narrowed with cunning. "We will wait. Have patience. We will watch. We will follow until the moment for our final victory arrives. We will confound Joe, strip him of his power. We will have victory." Satan hacked a hideous chuckle. "Such a marvelous thing. Betrayal delivered by friends. If Joe decides to pray, I must make sure that his only way to gauge its success is how he feels. A successful prayer must produce the desired feeling, which is very difficult to accomplish when one is ill. If Joe ever figures this out, our situation is, for the moment, desperate. I must decide how to use this present state to our advantage, rather than enjoy our most recent triumph." At Joe's home, the demons abruptly called it a day. A few of them swooped down, spit out some evil thoughts, and then the majority of them soared off like a crazed flock into the night, leaving only Smug and Gloom on watch. The sudden silence was jarring. Gloom was nothing significant, nothing to revere or dread. He was small, thin like a salamander, and repulsive. He knew his lowly station, but his blows still had impact. He was part of the master plan. His lips stretched open and his ragged teeth clicked as he mumbled his evil words. Gloom barked out another sulphurous laugh and rolled like a playful pup. But even with only 2 small demons, Joe found little peace. Alone in his study, frustrated by the day's events, Joe began to throw things around, smashing everything he could get his hands on. He screamed so hard that drool frothed in his mouth. He yelled that he was scared, that he couldn't take it anymore. He wanted to die. Joe was desperate for some relief. He grabbed the decanter of whiskey and glugged it down. Stunned by his exertion, he collapsed on the floor, sobbing. Even after he was considerably drunk, his anxiety persisted.